went on record, well, at least Randy Quaid said, you can see this on the internet, on YouTube, he said, there's a bank that told me that said, we prefer dead actors, they don't get in the way. What do you think happened to Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley and Rudolph Valentino and James Dean, etc.? People. These guys, there's some smart lawyers that have placed themselves in Hollywood and they are there to bring you to fame and glory and then kill you and take your money. That's what they did to Michael Jackson. It was a whack job. Simple as that. There's plenty of proof. But the reason I'm going into that, down that tangent, is the fact that this is the knowledge that will bring us back to sanity. And this is the one that they are scared of the most. This is the great heresy that has been persecuted for thousands of years. Because this is empowerment. This is unity consciousness. This teaches you how to think. Whereas Rome has taught us what to think, because she likes to divide and conquer. And let who shall be deceived, let him be deceived. We're here to administer the affairs of God, because that's what they do. The Vatican administers all of the affairs of God in our courts. When you get a writ and a summons, that's coming from a scriva notary. A scriva notary, right? Jesus in the Gospels condemns 5 classes of people, right? Unless you're aware of it. He's got the Sadducees. I'm spelling this wrong, I know that. Please don't pay. The Pharisees, the scribes, lawyers, and tax collectors. That's it. And who are they? Are they still around? Oh yeah, you better believe it. These guys, scribes, scriva, that's a V by the way, sorry about my bad writing. Scriva notary. Notaries, that's a writer of indulgences. I've exposed this in other videos of mine. You see the scribes, that's why he doesn't like the scribes. The Pharisees, these are people that, like your priests and your money changers. These are the money ones. These are the law guys. These are the guys who get big educations to go into politics. Like your John Howards and your Rudds and Gillards and these creeps to run us. And you know what? They're lawyers. Oh yeah, they study law because they want to bind you. And they know how to bind you. It's called statutory legislation. It's not the law of God. We're only bound to one law, and that is don't hurt anybody.
If we are all one, why are they like that?
Because they've divided us. This unites. They have divided us. The elites that are doing this, dividing us, are causing you to have your label. Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, Pentecostal.
So we all go back to one in them too.
If this doesn't take over the whole planet in the next 10 years, it's all over.
Okay.
It's coming back. It will come back. Hermes has always promised to come back and return. Okay? One only needs to read the Lament of Hermes, right, from the Hermetica, where Hermes predicted, and so did Hesiod, by the way. Actually, I'll read these. That's why I brought these along, because I don't know. I've done all my notes and I'm happy. I'm just sort of leaving this time to sort of deal with loose things that I brought along. Okay, so because it all pertains to the holy science, as above, so below. When you know above where all the planets are and what they're doing, you know below, and you know what's going to be happening for you. This is what, in Works and Days by Hesiod, he said, notwithstanding this, he was talking about the Iron Age, for now truly is a race of iron. He just explained the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Hero Age, and the Iron Age. And he says this, and the gods shall lay for sore trouble upon them, but notwithstanding, even these shall have some good mingled with their evils. And Zeus will destroy this race of mortal men also, when they come to have grey hair on their temples at their birth. The father will not agree with his children, nor the children with their father, nor guest with the host, nor comrade with comrade, nor will brother be dear to brother as aforetime. Men will dishonour their parents, and they will grow quickly old, and will carp at them, chiding them with bitter words. Hard-hearted they, for not knowing the fear of the gods. They will not repay their aged parents the cost of their nurture. For might shall be their right, and one man shall sack another's city. There will be no favour for the man who keeps his oath, or for the evildoer and the violent dealing. Strength will be right, and reverence will cease to be, and the wicked will hurt the worthy man, speaking false words against him, and will swear an oath upon them. Envy, foul mouth, delighting in evil, and scowling face will go along with wretched men, one and all. So there's no hope for the Iron Age. Hesiod said that. In the Bible, 1 Timothy chapter 3, it says, "For in the last days there shall be men lovers of violence and greedy and slanderous and etc., etc." Hermes did that. Now, of course, this is the original. This is the original. And in the Lament of Hermes, he says, "No one, I see times to come, no one will pursue philosophy with single-mindedness and purity of heart. Those with a grudging and ungenerous temperament will try to prevent men discovering the priceless gift of immortality. Philosophy will become confused, making it hard to comprehend. It will be corrupted by spurious speculation." This is long. This is a long prophecy. But Hermes foresaw because he knew the cycle. He knew that the golden age that Saturn bequeathed to Jupiter, and then Mars and then Venus and all these planets have taken over, and respectively we've been in Jupiter for 2,000 years. Jupiter's now giving back the reins to Saturn. Before that was Mars. There was a lot of wars going on in that time. And then Taurus, there was a lot of, bull worship and Mithra and slaying of bulls, and the Hindus with their, reverence for the bull, etc. The Egyptians for Hathor. It comes from the age. You see, you always honour the sign that the sun is in. For instance, during the year, you get to, this is what they call Lent, the days of Lent, 40 days. Well, they eat fish, don't they? Because of Pisces, right? And then you eat lamb, and then you eat beef. You'll see that you just look at the holidays of the religions and what they're observing, and you'll see that it all goes in with above. Everything above dictates what happens below. Everything. Egypt is an image of the heavens, and the whole cosmos dwells there. In this its sanctuary, but the gods will desert the earth and return to heaven, abandoning this land that was once the home of spirituality. Egypt will be forsaken and desolate, bereft of the presence of the gods. It will be overrun by foreigners who will neglect our sacred ways. This holy land of temples and shrines will be filled with corpses and funerals. The sacred Nile will be swollen with blood, and her waters will rise utterly fouled with gore. But I foresee that in times to come, clever intellectuals will mislead the minds of men, turning them away from pure philosophy. It will be taught that our sacred devotion was ineffectual, and the heartfelt piety and assiduous service with which we Egyptians honour Atum was a waste without reward. Egypt will be widowed. Every sacred voice will be silenced. Darkness will be preferred to light. No eyes will rise to heaven. The pure will be thought insane, and the impure will be honoured as wise. The madman will be believed brave, and the wicked, look at it, like George Bush, turns up, in Iraq with a military uniform and hops off the helicopter, and all these idiots who watch Fox, and all those buffoons, Glenn Beck and all those idiots on there spewing forth their vomitous lies, and they think, oh, George Bush is a hero, he's a hero. Well, Egypt's just telling us they're buffoons. The buffoons are the ones that are called heroes. And the heroes, we put them in mental asylums like Ezra Pound. The true heroes, the true aristocratic, spirit-loving, wise philosophers, they get thrown into mental asylums. That's what it's saying. Knowledge of the immortal soul will be laughed at, and denied. No reverent words worthy of heaven will be heard or believed. Nothing will remain of your religion but an empty tale, which even your own children will not believe. Nothing will be left to tell of your wisdom but old graven stones, etc., etc. So you see, Hesiod said it, Homer said it, the Bible says it. It's the Dark Ages. It's simple as that. These are the Dark Ages. Iron, there's 2,000 years of iron and a lot of bronze here. We've had basically 5,000 years of the time of Amun, 5,000 years of the time of Amun, which means hidden, according to Stephen Miller. You see? And according to Stephen Miller, he says that Akhenaten, who was around about here, tried to bring back the age of Aten, which was here. This was the age of Aten over here, going back here. Aten, and this is Amun. 5,000 years of darkness, according to the Egyptians, the indigenous wisdom keepers. Now, the philosophers also spoke much about what we need to do in our thoughts, our speaking, our actions. For instance, Epictetus and Seneca, first century philosophers. Marcus Aurelius based a lot of his wisdom on Epictetus's writing. And by the way, these are the two philosophers that most people suspect in history that Christian principles were based on, these guys. Seneca was Nero's philosopher and Epictetus was a contemporary. And there are scholars out there who swear black and blue that these are the two guys. Because when you read, you read Epictetus or Seneca and you will find principles that leave this book for dead. Absolutely exquisite Roman and Grecian philosophy. It's exquisite because it comes from a higher school, comes from a higher consciousness. They remembered the ancients. And if you think they weren't that smart, well, you need to go for a walk down to Egypt and see all the beautiful optical machinery, the machinery with which they put grooves in those granite rocks and polish those rocks. And you can see clearly there's abundant evidence, especially in Carmen Butler's DVD, The Pyramid Code, that they used high-tech machines, optical precision, laser precision machinery, stuff that we don't even know about yet. We still have not discovered it. It is impossible to make a pyramid like they did. It's absolutely impossible. You can see it. Anyone with a half a brain can work that out. It's impossible. Who did it? Well, the higher consciousness. The higher ages did it. And these guys remembered it. Anything you read, I don't know where to start, but this one of Seneca is on anger, mercy, and revenge. And how he explains, not in a hard and allegorical and confused manner that the Bible does, but in a clear manner, how we can overcome anger and how we can, improve our spirituality. I'd love to share something, but I think I'll press forward because what I want to discuss is the diet of the vegetarian philosopher. Okay, and this is important because remember the word animal. And it has to do with, the eating of flesh, according to the philosopher, has to do with the shedding of blood. And that's soul, animal. Whereas plants, there's no bloodshed. Plato in the Republic urged that the upper classes should abstain from eating meat. Not only a vegetarian diet was the healthiest option, but growing plants also requires less land than producing animal food. Porphyry, in his book, this is a Thomas Taylor version, right? Porphyry. His 4 books on abstinence from animal food. They burnt his books in the 3rd century, Porphyry, because he wrote against the Christians. And Celsus did 100 years before him. Those books must be read if you want to understand who Christianity really, really is. This false, rubbish, antichrist Christianity on the scene in your churches, in the community. It's absolutely the Antichrist, because this is the true Christian religion, based on science. It's not based on any kind of hocus pocus that they're teaching in the churches. Porphyry said that the concept of justice should be extended to animals, as justice in this case means not to commit unnecessary murder. Most of meat eaters justify their choice by claiming that animals are irrational and therefore not subjected to the same moral rules. But Porphyry refutes this argument by saying that this is not a reasonable thinking, as there are humans who lack rationality and yet they are protected by moral rules against murdering solely for being humans. Thus, Porphyry says that it is not completely accurate to believe that animals are irrational, as they have memory, sensations, fellow feeling and prudence. The fact that they cannot communicate properly their reasoning does not mean that they shouldn't be treated with justice. If a person comes from another country and speaks a different language, this person shouldn't be punished because others cannot understand what he or she says. Marsilio Ficino, the guy who we just spoke about, the Renaissance master, said he argued that a vegetarian diet could help a person elevate consciousness and purify the body. He encouraged his followers to become vegetarians and abstain from anything that could enslave the senses, such as the kind of bodily pleasures that could dominate the mind. Plutarch, in his tractate on the eating of flesh, he argued that people are not naturally carnivorous, but gluttony makes them cruel, as the desire to please the senses with the taste of flesh becomes more important than the life of other living creatures. Allowing animal slaughter unnecessarily only indicates that men are being dominated by their bodies. In accordance with the Platonic philosophy, Neoplatonists defend that the mind should govern men's principles. As the use of intellect, it is one of the things that differentiate humans from animals. And when the bodily instincts take over, men are usually corrupted. So the only reason why people do not want to give up eating animals is because eating flesh pleases the senses. A true philosopher must be above the senses and must not allow the instincts to overshadow the principles. Leonardo da Vinci, in letters exchanged with friends, usually mentioned piety for animals. He was a vegetarian, of course. And it is said that he bought birds at the market only to set them free. As a good Neoplatonist, Da Vinci assumed that killing animals just to satisfy one's desires for flesh was absurd. It attests to the incapability of having control over the senses. Plato called this kind of behaviour tyranny of the senses. With the intellect, when the intellect learns that something is morally wrong, but the physical body ignores this principle in the name of its satisfaction. Plutarch says, "We can claim no great right over land animals which are nourished with the same food, inspire the same air, wash in, drink the same water that we do ourselves, and when they are slaughtered, they make us ashamed of our work by their terrible cries. And then again, by living amongst us, they arrive at some degrees of familiarity and intimacy with us." He goes on to say, Plutarch, in his essay on flesh eating, "If they could now assume consciousness and speak, they might exclaim, 'O blessed and God-loved men who live at this day, what a happy age in this world's history has fallen to your lot, who plant and reap an inheritance of all good things which grow for you in ungrudging abundance. What rich harvest do you not gather in? What wealth from the plants, from the plains? What innocent pleasures is it not in your power to reap from the rich vegetation surrounding you on all sides? You may indulge in luxurious food without staining your hands with innocent blood. While as for us, wretches, our lot was cast in an age of the world the most savage and frightful conceivable. We were plunged into the midst of an all-prevailing and fatal want of the commonest necessities of life from the period of Earth's first genesis. while yet the gross atmosphere of the globe hid the cheerful heavens from view, while the stars were yet wrapped in a dense and gloomy mist of fiery vapours, and the sun, earth itself, had no firm, regular course. Our globe was then a savage and uncultivated wilderness, perpetually overwhelmed with the floods of the disorderly rivers, abounding in shapeless and impenetrable morasses and forests. So what he's saying there is the animal feels, what a time to be alive at this, the worst time in which humans just come along and just rip your head off and eat you. That's from the point of view of the animal. Nothing puts us out of countenance, not the charming beauty of their form, not the plaintive sweetness of their voice or cry, not their mental intelligence, not the purity of their diet, not superiority of understanding. For the sake of a part of their flesh only, we deprive them of the glorious light of the sun, of the life for which they were born. The plaintive cries they utter we affect to take to be meaningless, whereas in fact they are entreaties and supplications and prayers addressed to us by each which way. Is it not the satisfaction of your real necessities we deprecate? It is not the satisfaction of your real necessities we deprecate, but the wanton indulgence of your appetites. Kill to eat, if you must or will, but do not slay me that you may feed luxuriously. So in other words, the animal's saying, I don't begrudge you, you need to eat. But must you slay because for your better eating? You've already got eating. There's already food out there. There's cherries and apples and bananas and carrots and pumpkins. Why does blood need to be spilled? This is the thinking we might have to address if it concerns us. Alas for our savage inhumanity. It is a terrible thing to see the table of a rich man decked out by those layers of corpses, the butchers and cooks. A still more terrible sight is the same table after the feast. For the wasted relics are even more than the consumption. Have you seen this? I'm privileged to be able, I'm a musician, a professional musician, so I get to do corporate functions, So, you go to a function of, say a bank break-up party at the end of the year or something, right? And you see all these diners and all these intellectuals that go to celebrate the corporation, you see, and I get to play and watch their behaviour. And I see how much food, they've got the choice of grapes and watermelon and all sorts of carcasses. Bring out fish and they bring out meat and they bring out all sorts of food. And as Plutarch says, the wasted relics are even more than the consumption. And yet people are starving to death on this planet. These victims then have given us their lives uselessly, as other times from the mere niggardliness. The host will grudge to distribute his dishes, and yet he grudged not to deprive innocent beings of their existence. Well, I have taken away the excuse of those who allege that they have the authority and sanction of nature. That man is not by nature carnivorous is proved in the first place by the external frame of his body, seeing that to none of the animals designed for living on flesh has the human body any resemblance. He has no curved beak, no sharp talons, no claws, no pointed teeth, no intense power, or stomach, or heat of blood, which might help him to masticate and digest the gross and tough flesh substance. On the contrary, by the smoothness of his teeth, the small capacity of his mouth, the softness of his tongue, and the sluggishness of his digestive apparatus, nature sternly forbids him to feed on flesh. And that's what Sri Yukteswar says in The Holy Science. There's a chapter there on flesh. And it's absolutely not for human consumption. And You know, and it really upsets me when people who take the philosophical stance and try to be teachers, you know, in the truth movement and etc., and who do the opposite, you know, and teach that it's beneficial. And I know that people are doing this, and it just really, really makes me so distraught. It's absolutely not beneficial at all for anything. There's nothing beneficial in eating flesh at all. Not a thing. Nothing. You know, it's toxic. As they say, it's, you know, it's a waste of soul, animal being soul. But anyway, this is the thing that is more one studies and deepens his level of appreciation of the spiritual and the metaphysical of all of this, the more one then sees the need to adapt. You see, there are many things that we can do. Now this establishment, Magpie House, is dealing with yoga, right? So George is teaching yoga, and this is a physical and spiritual thing to practice. It has both benefits. You see, physically, the yoga is just a magic for the body, but it's also a spiritual thing, you see. And this is why a lot of churchgoers will say, oh, yoga, oh, that's from the devil, right? It's from the devil, yoga. You know, stretching and filling your mind with good information is from the devil. But you see, these are some of the things that we need to look at. Are we exercising and stretching with the good food that we eat, the good light food? Because raw food, and if you can add more raw food into your diet, you get more light, right? Because it hasn't been burned, cooked, grilled, roasted, fried, or anything like that. You see, which actually destroys the enzymes in the food. But you know, things like yoga is all about stretching. You know, it's just getting all the joints moving and stuff like that. Dancing is a good way to do yoga. You know, grab a partner and do half an hour a day or something like that. Because the more light food that you eat, and that's LIGHT, raw food, the more your body can use those atoms, because they haven't been destroyed. You know, they haven't lost an element like an electron, which is what causes free radicals. You see, and processed food is like that. That's why they cook it to death. It's fried, and cooked food is actually destroying the food, the goodness of the food. As you grow with this knowledge of and by the way, Priscatologia is not saying that only ancient knowledge is useful and no new stuff. I mean, you know, there's new information that is handy too. It's timeless wisdom. It's not Prisca as in ancient, it's timeless. And as you learn this timeless wisdom, then you grow and you see the need to shed things that you discern for yourself that are no good for you anymore. You see, you might need to eat some fish at the moment, and because we've had thousands of years of this meat-eating tradition, we've fallen. You see, the tyranny of the senses. And in some cultures, they eat humans. They've gone one step further and they've gone to cannibalism, right? They're not satisfied with just eating animals. But we fell to that condition. It was not like that in the past. In the past, we did not do this. And I've got proof of that. You know, you've got Ovid in the Metamorphoses 2,000 years ago saying that, please, he's saying to fellow humans, because he was Pythagorean, and they were all, man, every philosopher was a vegetarian, right? So, the great philosophers, that is, all of them. And he says there that, you know, even Empedocles, the Sicilian philosopher, he was around the time of Pythagoras.
100 odd years ago, vegetarians were called Pythagoreans.
Yeah, Pythagoreans, yeah. But as we go, you know, we can make these decisions for ourselves, because you know what you need and you are a priest unto yourself. Simple as that. So no one's giving anybody any hard and fast rules, and no one's standing up trying to be the best example. I'm not, certainly not. So don't. I try to tell people just that I'm not there to give real, deep, and specific advice of any way to live. I know yoga's good. I do it. I practice my own yoga at home. I do my own stretches and look after. I feel which muscles need, a stretch, elongation. Where I might do a little bit of dancing to relax or something like that. Breathing is very, very important to learn how to breathe. Unfortunately, a lot of people are breathing incorrectly, right? You see them do this, they suck in here and they breathe in here when they're breathing in. That doesn't make sense. If you blow into a balloon, it expands, right? So when you're drawing in, everything should be just going straight down through the diaphragm, right down the bottom. It should be sort of going all the way down to the feet, if you can. You envisage the breath going down to the feet almost, and expansion. And then when you blow out, then you can contract. But I can see people's breathing from a long way away. I can see whether they're breathing correctly or not. That needs to be corrected first, because once you can get, and there is a philosophical school that suggests that you've been given a certain number of breaths. Yeah, you've been dished out a certain number of breaths, and once they expire, you expire. That's what they say. So they teach, and I think it's in the East where they say, so breathe slowly, because you're going to live long. Yeah. And you'll find most of these geniuses and most of these great inventors. Francis Crick, for instance, discovered DNA on LSD. Okay? This is why the likes of Aldous Huxley and Timothy Leary, advanced the idea that, we need to try some good, mind-expanding, natural plants that have DMT in there. DMT is what the pineal gland produces, you see. Dimethyltryptamine, and it causes you to have visions. This is the visionary eye. Yeah, well, the war on drugs is basically, it's a confused war, because why would they be attacking plants that are just growing like psilocybin mushroom and plants that have DMT, when they should be going after George Bush, when he declares a war on drugs, he should be going after, your barbiturates and your what other sort of drugs that are bad, not lumping them in with entheogens, psychedelics and hallucinogens, and that's what they're doing. They're doing that because they are the ones who make the drugs. They are the drug traffickers, and they've been exposed many times. So I'm not just making this up. George Bush has got a big drug pushing cartel going, and that's why he has his war on drugs, so he can get funding from taxpayer money for it, so that they've got big police force, and they're all already taking care of the drug trafficking, and they can use that to disguise their war on drugs to get people who are taking cannabis, for instance, which is a mind-expanding drug. And this is what they do. They're all very, very clever. Now, just a little bit more. We've got Porphyry now. He says, it does not follow, if we have more intelligence than other animals, that on this account they are to be deprived of intelligence, as neither must it be said that partridges do not fly because hawks fly higher. Someone therefore may admit that the soul is copassive with the body, and that the former suffers something from the latter. It must be demonstrated therefore that there is a rational power in animals, and that they are not deprived of prudence. And in the first place, indeed, each of them knows whether it is imbecile or strong. And in consequence of this, it defends some parts of itself, but attacks with others. Thus, the panther uses its teeth, the lion its nails and teeth, the horse its hooves, the ox its horns, the cock its spurs, and the scorpion its sting. But the serpents of Egypt use their spittle, whence also they are called tuades. spitters. With this, they blind the eyes of those that approach them, and thus a different animal uses a different part of itself to attack in order to save itself. They likewise change their places of abode at certain times, and know everything which contributes to their advantage. In a similar manner, in fishes and in birds, a reasoning energy of this kind may be perceived. So that's what the philosopher thinks, you see. And that's where that's where we're going. This is philosophy, because what is philosophy? Phil means love, and Sophia, she's a goddess of wisdom. Right brain. We love this. We love wisdom. Why wouldn't you want to be a philosopher? A lover of wisdom? Or you want to be a doofus? You know, the dunce on the block? You'd know. And this is the knowledge that grows that. Lucius Annius Seneca. That's the guy who we just spoke about. Seneca. He was a vegetarian. He said, "Many dishes have induced many diseases. Note how vast a quantity of lives one stomach absorbs. Insatiable, unfathomable gluttony searches every land and every sea. Some animals it persecutes with snares and traps, with hunting nets, with hooks, sparing no sort of toil to obtain them. There is no peace allowed to any species of being." You have a look at those little chickens that are cooped up, and they can only face this way. And they've got their beaks have been burned off, the pain. You have a look at your cows that have had branding on their faces. Have you seen the movie Earthlings narrated by Joaquin Phoenix? Please check out Earthlings.
I couldn't show that one here, it's too graphic.
It's too graphic, but it shows how what scientists are doing to animals, you know, testing on chimpanzees and injecting them with all sorts of things. I think those animals just waiting for the morning sun to come through the window so they can be injected with AIDS and, you know, all sorts of things that Bayer and Johnson & Johnson and all of these big pharma run by the Vatican. Yeah, we don't see it. We don't see what's going on in those laboratories, but you've got little chickens and little guinea pigs and innocent little animals. Plotinus, everyone's favourite. He was in the 2nd century, Neoplatonist, student of Harmonius Saccus, I believe. But anyway, this is what he says in his 9th tractate. The intellectual principle, the ideas and the authentic existence. All human beings from birth onward live to the realm of sense more than to the intellectual. Forced of necessity to attend first to the material, some of them elect to abide by that order, and their life throughout make its concerns their first and their last. The sweet and the bitter of sense are their good and evil. They feel they have done all if they live along pursuing the one and barring the doors of the other. And those of them that pretend to reasoning have adopted this as their philosophy. They are like the heavier birds which have incorporated much from the earth and are so weighed down that they cannot fly high for all the wings nature has given them. You know that pelican, right? When he grabs a big fish, right, and he tries to get away. He's got too much fish in his mouth, right? He's saying people have, you know, filled their heads with opinions, you know. Oh, and my opinion's right, yours is wrong, and, you know, and I think it should be like this, and it's all heavy with opinion, and they can't fly. Because it says all human beings from birth onward live in the realm of sense. You see, when you trust those 5 senses, you know, what does it feel like? Feels like an elephant. Right, right, but it could be a bear, and it's about to, you know, eat you. You know, you can't trust your senses. You can't trust your sight and your hearing. You know, and that's where this mind, the 6th sense, this is where. Well, I mean, we have to trust our senses, don't we? That's what we've got. That's what the brain. I mean, I'm seeing you by virtue of my eyesight. So my brain's telling me that you're there. So I need that so I know who I'm looking at, right? But these are pure, what is seen through the eye is not how it really is. It's the reality of appearances, you see.
Just your perception, and everybody's perception can be different.
That's right. Others do indeed lift themselves a little above the earth. The better in their soul urges them from the pleasant to the nobler. But they are not of power to see the highest, and so, in despair of any surer ground, they fall back in virtue's name upon those actions and options of the lower form, of the lower from which they sought to escape. But there is a third order, those godlike men who in their mightier power, in the keenness of their sight, have clear vision of the splendour above and rise to it from among the cloud and fog of earth and hold firmly to that other world. Looking beyond all here, delighted in the place of reality, their native land, like a man returning after long wanderings to the pleasant ways of his own country. You see, what they're saying is eventually the godlike one, or the one that looks for God, you know, the cause of it all, he just doesn't satisfy, he's not satisfied with studying effects. He wants to know the causes, you see. Then he returns back to that land. After he does mighty searches, he searches for the truth. And what is the other place, and how is it accessible? It is to be reached by those who, born with the nature of the lover, are also authentically philosophic by inherent temper, in pain of love towards beauty, but not held by material loveliness. You see that pelican? That loveliness of that fish, but it can't fly, so it gets killed. Taking refuge from that in which, taking refuge from that in things whose beauty is of the soul, such things as virtue, knowledge, institutions, law and custom, and thence, rising still a step, each to the source of this loveliness of the soul, thence to whatever be above, that again, until the utmost is reached. It's just exquisite. Plotinus's. Here is the Nag Hammadi Gospels. Okay, now they are hermetic. They talk about Jesus, but not as a historical person, because that's how Jesus should be spoken about. Jesus is not a historical person. In the scriptures, he is defined as the Logos. Remember? The Logos. That's where speech. See, this is the Father, the thinker. And then the Logos speaks forth, and then the Holy Spirit gets sent in Gemini to go and work. You see? So it's the Logos. It's the wisdom. It's just divine wisdom of Hermes. Everything that Jesus has ever said in any gospel can be taken directly from the mouth of Hermes. That can be proven. And it is. There's a gospel called The Discourse on the 8th and the 9th. And that's what I'm encouraging you to read. The 8th and the 9th. That's talking about the 8 rings of the octave that we live in. So they were talking about that science in the Nag Hammadi documents. Okay? So I urge you to have a read of some of those if you're interested in knowing who Jesus really is, so we can put all this back into perspective, because Rome has told us that it's a historical person, and we will only have salvation by that historical person. I've proven with all my videos, not just this one, all my presentations, that is wrong. Jesus is, in fact, the spiritual essence of who we are. Oh, look, there would have been someone historically that would have taken that name, just like there would be a historical Jesus, if you like, because the mystery school that was around in the Middle East that was churning out Jesuses was operating until Titus came along and destroyed it. Remember Titus's arch? He commemorated the destruction of the Jerusalem, and they've got the Jewish menorah. Remember that? The Arch of Titus in Rome. Well, he commemorated that, the destruction, because what they did was they destroyed one of the Mediterranean's schools where you could go and be initiated. And in the initiation, you had to go through ordeals, you see. So they were actually putting people on crosses. They were doing it. They used to do this in Egypt. This is why Freemasons, have got all their strange rituals. It's all based on this. This is Freemasonry. And they have to, go through the ordeals just like the son goes through the ordeals, betrayal, and then, blindfolded, and then killed, and then he's got to climb up and run away from his enemies, Satan is always there, and then he's got to conquer, and then there's the sign of exaltation of the sun, and here is the sign where, etc., etc. Right? That's what we do in our ordeals. Now, in the Middle East, that's what they were doing. They were bringing people, they had to carry their cross up the mountain, and then they had to be hung on the cross for 3 days. And when they survived the initiates, they were given a new name, and usually that name was Jesus. There's the Jesus. That's how it was known. It was not a historical person. It's the spiritual person in you. It's your soul. It's who you are. And then when one has achieved this illumination, one then is able to have the crown chakra pierced, and he is an illuminated chief, an Illuminati. There it is. There it is. And that is, the vision that St. John had in Revelation. The moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. All described in the first chapter of Revelation, where it says, I beheld the Lord, and his face shone like the sun. Well, that's the sun. And he had a sword that issued from his mouth. Well, that's Mars. Mars is the martial one. He's ready to fight at the drop of a hat. And he had white hair, because he was the ancient one. Well, that's Saturn, old man Kronos. He's got white hair. It's all grey. He doesn't got any, nice dyed hair. The belt around the paps. I mean, what's Jesus doing with some nice little boobies? Well, and what's he doing with a belt around there, like a bra? So it's a bra, basically. Well, it's Venus. So he's describing in the first chapter of Revelation, and what happens is these are the 7 vowels of the creation, the 7 planets. These are the Elohim. That's the Elohim. He was actually describing the Elohim, the solar system, our big brother as above. Whatever it does, we do. We've got the sun in here. Marsilio Ficino has had a lot to say about the sun. I want to share something with you here. The sign in which the sun is exalted, that is Aries. In this way, becomes the head of the signs, signifying the head in every living thing. Also, the sign in which the sun is domiciled, that is Leo. It is the heart of the signs, and so rules the heart in any living thing. I'm stressing that because that's what I'm talking about this in all of my presentations, you see. And the reason being is because that's how the system works. Aries is always the head. And the words for Aries have always meant that. In Jewish, Rosh means the head. In Greek, Krios means the head. In Latin, Primus means the head. That's where the primavera starts, the first season, the spring. Prima, that's Primus, right? Right ascension begins here. There's a lot of reasons. For when the sun enters Leo, it extinguishes in many regions the epidemic of the python's poison. Moreover, the yearly fortune of the whole world will always depend on the sun, on the entry of the sun into Aries. And hence, from this, the nature of any spring may properly be judged, just as the quality of summer is judged from the ingress of the sun into Cancer, or that of autumn from its entrance into Libra, and from the coming into Capricorn the quality of winter is discovered. These things are gleaned from the figures of the heavens present at that time. Since time depends on motion, the sun distinguishes the 4 seasons of the year through the 4 cardinal signs. Similarly, When the sun returns by the exact degree and minute to its place in the nativity of any person, his share of fortune is unfolded through the whole year. It happens in this way because the movement of the sun is the first and chief of the planets is very simple, as Aristotle says. Neither falling away from the middle of the zodiac, as the others do, nor retrograding. You see, all the other planets retrograde. And what's retrograde? Well, you know, if you're watching the planets, you see Saturn, he's doing this, then all of a sudden you see him go like this. And then he goes back forward and he goes direct. So he's transiting a sign, and then all of a sudden he goes back a few degrees. And you go, what the hell? And you're watching this, you know, wow. I was watching that last year with Saturn in Virgo, right? It goes all the way to Spica, then it goes back the other way in Libra here, Virgo and Libra. Saturn's been here for the last couple of years, right? So it retrograded, it went back to Virgo, and then it goes back, now it's in Libra, right? Well, it's still physically in Virgo, but anyway. Won't go into that because it needs a lot of explaining. But in our vortex solar system, you see the planets are all doing this, and of course that's why every orbit is elliptical, because they're all occurring in cones. Every orbit. There's not an orbit out there that is not elliptical. And because it's doing this, you see, it's conical. So what happens is when, let's say this will be Earth, here's the Sun, there's Mercury, Venus and the Earth. Say we're about here and Saturn is coming around and say Mars is coming around here, right? Because we are travelling fast along this way, we are heading in that direction, and Mars is going around this curve, he will seem to be going backwards. You see? They don't retrograde physically. They don't sort of stop, you know, and then go back and then, well, that was good, interesting little retrograde, that was, very kinky. They don't do that. But that's how it works, because we're all following the sun in its cone, and the sun is the leader. And all the planets follow. It's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's Little Red Riding Hood. It's Hercules. Samson pulls down the gates of Gaza. It's Troy. It's Helen of Troy. Helen of Troy is the moon. And where's my? There it is. Now this guy, Thomas Taylor, he was interpreting all the philosophers, right? And he's the best one. But he's talking about Troy. Of course, you see, there are scholars who really believe and insist that Troy was physically on the historical plane. It's good when you have intelligent people, you know, shedding the light on all of these. You know, like you have, how many books have been written, you know, trying to prove that Jesus was historical and etc. and the apostles and everything like that. You know, but then you get one great book that comes along, like Alvin Boyd Coons, that one, and dismantles it with proofs. Absolute proofs. Well, what he's saying here about the Trojan War, etc., if I can find it. And I've got so many good points here. It's just beautiful the way this guy explains the myths, you know. Oh, there it is. Of course, it's in The Wandering of Ulysses, okay? This is one of the books that he translated. And he says, the Trojans are called genuine. For all the lives which subsist about bodies and irrational souls are favourable and attentive to their proper matter. On the contrary, the Greeks are rational souls, coming from Greece, i.e. from the intelligible into matter. You see, so it's talking about this. The Trojan War is talking about man, and the Greeks, of course, are going to call themselves the rational ones, coming in and experiencing the experience of matter. Hence, the Greeks are called foreign, but vanquish the Trojans as being of a superior order. But they fight with each other about the image of Helen, as the poet says, about the image of Aeneas. Helen signifying intelligible beauty, being a certain vessel attracting to itself intellect. An efflux, therefore, of this intelligible beauty is imparted to matter through Venus, and about this efflux of beauty the Greeks fight with the Trojans, rational with irrational lives. And those indeed that oppose and vanquish matter return to the intelligible world, which is their true country. You see, so when Ulysses spends 10 years returning to his true country, that's 10,000 years of incarnation it's talking about. That's talking about us. 10 is just, it's not 10 years literally, it's a symbolic number. According to the, as therefore the prophet in the 10th book of the Republic, and those indeed that oppose and vanquish matter return to the intelligible world which is their true country, but those who do not, as in the case with the multitude, are bound to matter. As therefore the prophet in the 10th book of the Republic, previously to the descent of souls, announces to them how they may return to their pristine felicity according to periods of 1,000 and 10,000 years. Thus also Calchas predicts to the Greeks their return in 10 years, the number 10 being the symbol of a perfect period. And as in the lives of souls, some are elevated through philosophy, others through the amatory art, and others through the royal and warlike disciplines. So with respect to the Greeks, some act with rectitude through prudence, but others through war or love, and their return is different, according to their different pursuits. And that's how they all return back to Greece. Now, the best of the Jewish wisdom that you can get will come from the Sefer Yetzirah and the Zohar. Okay, these books perfectly explain all of this science. Okay, and in the Zohar, it's interesting to note in one of the books in the chapters in the Zohar, it talks about how to look at the Torah. And in here it explains that we must not look at the Bible, the Torah, as a literal document. Because the Jews gave us these silly stories. On a literal plane, they're silly, but they're wise stories. You know, they're hiding a great kernel of truth. You know, like a silly story like Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Well, the origin of this is very simple, to people who are thinking. They don't need to, do too much thinking. That would be a happy egg, wouldn't it? Full moon, and in the ovaries that would be the egg. Right? So the moon, she climbs up. New moon, she climbs. There's quarter moon, quarter sun. And she keeps waxing. And finally she gets into her kingdom. She's full and glowing. That's Mary Magdalene. That's Helen of Troy. This is Troy. This is Troy. Right? And when Humpty Dumpty falls off the wall, there's no king that can put it back together again, because that corresponds to the menstruation cycle. That egg's a goner. Right? So you see, all of the characters are there. There's not one that is not there. And this is what they're saying in the Zohar. Woe to the human being who says that the Torah presents mere stories and ordinary words. If so, we could compose a Torah right now with ordinary words and better than all of them. In other words, he's saying there's more to it than just ordinary little stories that you can mock. You know, when you hear about Samson killing his 1,000 with an ox, and Jonah, being swallowed by a whale for 3 days, etc. You know, please don't laugh at us. Even Origen in the 2nd century, the Alexandrian Gnostic Christian, said, they're just stories. They are stories that hide a deeper truth. Josephus said it. Philo Judaeus, Philo, the great 1st century scholar, he said that everything in the Bible, in fact he wrote works called Allegory, explaining the allegories in the Bible. The Apostle Paul in Galatians chapter 4 talks about the allegory of Sarah and Haggai. because Sarah would be the moon. And the moon is the mother of spiritual Israel. Right? She would be Isis. But the earth, Hagar, she is the mother of the slaves, because the earthbound people are slaves. Whereas spiritual ones that go to Sarah, you see. And where do you find Sarah? Well, she's on top of the mountain. That's the spiritual, our spiritual mother, you see. And when Moses climbs Mount Sinai, that's the mountain of sin, the mountain of the moon. Another word for moon is sin, and Sinai comes from that word. You see, it says, fools of the world look only at the garment, the story of the Torah. They know nothing more. Thomas Paine, who was a Hermetist, I'm going to wind up in 5 minutes. Thomas Paine, who was a Hermetist, and one of the founders of the Republic, of the Hermetic Republic of the United States of America. And he said, as to the Christian system of faith, it appears to me as a species of atheism, a sort of religious denial of God. It professes to believe in a man rather than in God. It is a compound made up chiefly of manism, but with but little deism. And it is near to atheism as twilight is to darkness. It introduces between man and his maker an opaque body, which it calls a redeemer. As the moon introduces her opaque self between the earth and the sun, and it produces by this means a religious or an irreligious eclipse of light. It has put the whole orbit of reason to shade. The effect of this obscurity has been that of turning everything upside down and representing it in reverse. And among the revolutions it has thus magically produced, it has made a revolution in theology. As to the theology that is now studied in its place, it is the study of human opinions and of human fancies concerning God. That's all it is. You go to church, you go to Jehovah's Witnesses, human opinions, buffoons. Go to the Mormons, same crap. Seventh-day Adventists, all of them. They've all got their patented version of the same rubbish lie from Rome. It is not the study of God himself in the works that he has made, but in the works or writings that man has made. That's what the churches are up to. Yeah. And it is not among the least of the mischiefs that the Christian system has done to the world that it has abandoned the original and beautiful system of theology, the Prisca Theologia. He knew it. And to make room for a hag of superstition. And you need to read what he says. He calls Christianity a dag on the spiritual evolution of the human race. A dag, like a sheep has a dag on its bum. That's what Christianity is. It's like a dag dragging us back into the world of superstition, killing scientists like Galileo Galilei and murdering prophets of this true wisdom. The age of ignorance commenced with the Christian system. But the Christian system laid all waste. And if we take our stand about the beginning of the 16th century, we look back through that long chasm to the time of the ancients, as over a vast sandy desert, in which not a shrub appears to intercept the vision to the fertile hills beyond. It is an inconsistency scarcely possible to be credited that anything should exist under the name of a religion that held it to be religious, to study and contemplate the structure of the universe that God made. So he's saying that Christianity has been opposed to the study of the universe, how God made it. It's been opposed. That's the enemy, Thomas Paine. That's what caused Teddy Roosevelt to call him a filthy little atheist 100 years later. Because, of course, Teddy was a corporate buffoon who wouldn't know what an atheist is. You know, he wouldn't know what Thomas Paine was anyway. He's just happy to vomit out his rubbish, like all the rest who came subsequent to the period of 1871 when they founded the Corporation of the United States, which is not the Hermetic Republic, Constitutional Republic of the United States of America. You see, everywhere where Hermes goes, he brings liberation. He did so to the Waldenses and the Lollards and the Huguenots and the Socinians and the Collegiants and the Anabaptists, etc. How many organisations, the Bogomils, the Cathars, the Albigenses, the Jews in Spain that were persecuted through the Inquisition. That was 1,000 years ago. And then the Renaissance came and they squashed that with the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. And then the Republic came and set itself up. And this is all Hermetic. But then the Vatican saw what was happening over in the new lands and it sent its banksters over to trick people. Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, says, "I killed the banks." Thomas Jefferson said, democracy is mob rule. We heard what Thomas Paine says. Thomas Paine also says that the Christian religion is a parody on the sun. I've got all those quotes. I've done them in other presentations. So these Hermetists tried to save the New World, but the Vatican came a-calling. After the death of Abraham Lincoln, they set up in Washington, D.C. a corporation called the United States, headed by the Vatican. That's why you have the two fasci in the Congress in America. The fasci belong to Rome. Rome tells you where it's ruling and who it's ruling and sodomizing. It makes fools and slaves out of the world. So this information is the information that frees, and I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation and urge you all to continue studying this stuff. You know, grab a book, a notepad, and do this. Do the zodiac, this wheel. This is the wheel that we were blessed with. That's why this is the most known symbol in the universe. This is our science, and no one shall take it away from us. It's coming back, and it will absolutely free mankind in the very, very near future. And it will destroy the fictions of false religion, absolutely obliterate them. It was prophesied. Hesiod prophesied it. Hermes prophesied it. They all said it. All the prophecies know that when this age comes and Saturn returns in Aquarius, big time truth. He's a truth dealer. Oh yeah, that's why he's got the scythe. He gives you life in truth and he takes it away. Everything is just with Saturn. So enjoy the Priscatologia and please continue to be prosperous in this information and spread it abroad, and we can help our brothers. And with that, I'd like to close and encourage anyone out there who's able to understand what I'm trying to achieve with all of this, and in particular with the 48 constellations, that I want to actually get anyone who knows how to do graphics and has equipment and time and is able to help. I would really like to reach out to anyone out there that can help me to put together a video that will have all of the stories, all of the legends, all of the Bibles and Gospels and mythologies, all of them interpretable by one short journey through the zodiac and the sun going through the zodiac from Aries, and we'll be able to see all the Bible characters and all the mythological characters in there. This is what I'd like to achieve. So if anyone out there is able to donate time and resources and any sort of skills to help me put that together, please contact me at universaltruthschool.com. Thank you.